So it's time to install Synergy Revolution onto your wheels. In this video, I'm going to show you some basic application tips and best practices to get the best results from this coating. So before we do anything else, let's take a quick look at what you're going to actually need to do the job. So first off, you have the Revolution kit. So within this kit, you do get the 15mm coating, get some good quality gloves as well. There's a pipette dropper. Now this can also be sprayed, but in this application here, we're just going to apply it normally. And these are the basics that you would get inside of this. Other things that you are going to need, an absolute must, is Synergy Prep. So this is for preparing the surface right before you apply the coating. Now obviously we have brand new wheels here, so we don't need to do any decontamination. But before we do anything, even with new wheels, we will be using Synergy Prep on them just to make sure the coating adheres correctly to the paint. In addition to that, we have our good old traditional microfiber applicator. So this is what we're going to apply the Revolution coating to, and then use this to evenly spread it onto the wheels. And we have two microfibers as well. So you'll see here, these are actually the same towel, but on this one I have the short pile side ready to go, and on this one I've got the long pile. So this one here will be used to level the coating off, and when I'm finished doing that, I'll use this just to finish it off and give it a final wipe down. Okay, so gloves are on now and we're all good to go. So we've got our Synergy Prep. Now normally if you're taking your wheels off your vehicle, which I'd highly recommend for coating them in general, also because you can get to the calipers nice easy, you would always usually have to decontaminate. So the process of that is going to be a case of using something like Incinerate Wheel Cleaner to do the heavy lifting to kick things off, then moving on to liquid fire, and also sometimes tar and glue remover as well, just for any stubborn tar spots or adhesive weight marks on the back of the wheel or in the barrels of the wheel. Obviously we don't have that to worry about today, which is great. Another thing you might notice is that these wheels are actually a satin finish. So that's another important thing to mention, is that Synergy Revolution is safe for satin wheels, matte wheels, and obviously gloss. Also things like diamond cut. There are no wheel finishes that Synergy Revolution hasn't been tested on, and it's safe for everything, so no worries that way. That includes the plastic center caps as well, of course. So Synergy Prep, I've already done the rear of the wheel, so it's just a case of giving a generous application and going over all the surfaces thoroughly. Now this handy wheel rotation tool is superb for this kind of thing. What I would say is don't be shy with the prep. It will start to evaporate quite quickly, so just make sure you have every surface covered thoroughly. And just repeat that process until you're completely happy with how everything is. Synergy Prep is not only a final degreaser and agent for promoting a healthy bond to the wheel, it also changes the surface of the wheel slightly by promoting a positive chemical charge, and this allows the coating to bond quicker to the wheel. So now that the preparation side has been completed, it's time to move on and actually coat the wheel itself. So first thing to do is take your Revolution coating, and with one finger over the lid, just give it a gentle shake to make sure everything is mixed in the bottle. It has a tamper-evident cap, so you'll need to press down and carefully open it, pointing it away from your face. Once you've done that, as quickly as you possibly can, stick your pipette dropper on there, and you're good to go. Now, take your applicator. So for a new applicator, you may need to put a few more drops onto it just to get it going for the first time, to get it primed. So what I'm going to do here is just very carefully place the Revolution on the ground. Now this floor is not ideal for this because it's actually textured, so you do have to be careful not to spill the coating over. It says 10 to 15 drops on the packaging. I don't tend to count it or go too overboard that way, just enough to make sure the pad has a relatively even coverage. So this is about right for your initial coverage. So now it's time to start applying it to the wheel, and I'm just going to tackle the flat spots first, so the faces of the wheels. Now you will start to see the satin wheel looks glossy, but don't worry about that. That's absolutely normal, totally fine. And what you can also find is that those few drops that I applied were enough to cover quite a substantial amount of the wheel already, and it's still spreading. Okay, once you've done the faces, move on and pay particular attention to any of these hard to reach areas. But just keep doing this until you feel that the coating is drying out on the pad or it's getting grippy. You can also flip the pad round, because I've obviously not been touching this side very much at all. So there's plenty of product on there. Just keep working it in. Now at this stage we don't have to worry about the rear of the spoke, so we're going to tackle that. Okay, and we're back round to where we started. If you're struggling or you're losing your place, it's a good idea to start where the valve stem is, and then that way you can work around and come back to that. Now what I'm going to do is another few drops, but this time on the edge of the pad, and this is obviously specific to these wheels, but it's to get this inner lip here. Plenty of product in there, because that looks like one of those areas that's going to capture the dirt and hold on to it. Okay, superb. So just a quick look over, make sure everything's coated. Looks good, but I'm just giving it an extra once over to be safe. Nice one. So a common question here is, how long do you leave the coating before levelling it? And there's no correct answer for that, because it does depend on the temperature and humidity. What I would say is the first thing you want to check is the faces you started on. Does it come off easily? Which yes it is. Then you know you have an ideal window of time. If the coating's grabby to remove, then you've left it too long. That is the golden rule with coatings in general. You can also look out for a rainbowing effect. However, on wheels it can be very difficult to see that. It's easier on a car, on car paint, on a flat panel. But on this, you can actually see it on the centre cap here, but it can be very difficult to see it, especially on satin wheels as well. So it's been about 30 seconds to a minute since I've applied it, so I'm just going to go ahead and level it off. So you'll notice that I'm talking about levelling it off, not buffing it off. And what I'm doing here is I'm taking off the top layer of residue from the coating. This is the same as a paintwork coating, where you take off the residue to prevent any high spots. Now a high spot is essentially it's an area that hasn't been wiped off correctly, and the coating has been left to harden on the surface, which is obviously not what you want. So we always make sure that we level the coating off with the short pile side. Do a very thorough job here, into the bolt holes, all the hidden areas. Now again, a wheel can be quite a tricky thing to coat without getting high spots, so it's worth taking a bit of extra time to make sure you go over every single section thoroughly. Especially these areas in here, they can be very hard to get 100% free of any residue, unless you take your time, of course. And it doesn't hurt to go over and give these a once over with some sort of an inspection light as well, just to make sure everything is good. Now I'm fairly happy with how that looks at the moment, but I'm going to take a light and just have a little double check. So using an inspection light is a really good way just to double check everything. And actually what I can see here is I have missed an area, and it was this area here around the lip of the wheel. So there's a good example of why it's always really good to double check, because that area would have been very, very difficult to actually remove high spots from. So before we move on to buffing the coating off, using the second tilt, we're going to apply it to the barrels of the wheel or the rear of the wheel, because what's going to happen, 100% guarantee it, you're going to buff off the spokes and then you're going to accidentally overlap it when you're doing the rears. So I do tend to go a little bit heavier for the barrels. There's more of a surface area to cover in here, but it's nice and easy. It's just the easiest part of doing the wheels. Always do the barrels first, my preference. Give it a nice application. And moving on to the rear of the spokes. I don't usually ceramic coat the area that sits on the hub. That's just my preference. I'm not sure if there's any specific interference issues for that when it sits on the hub of the vehicle, but I prefer not to do it, as I'm aware that these areas should never be painted, so I try and just keep it metal to metal where possible there. Okay, so nice simple application on the inner side of the wheel, and again we're going to go straight in here. And you'll notice that initially when the cone went on, it made the wheel look glossy, but that's now, once it's been levelled, it's back to satin. So satin paint, it's actually just clear coat, but it has a texture to it as well. So it is completely safe to use almost all products in satin or matte finishes, providing they're non-abrasive, which of course the coating is non-abrasive. And finally the lip, don't want to forget that this time. Perfect. So again, another quick look with the light. And it looks okay, possibly a little something there, but we're okay. Perfect. So it's been around about 5 minutes now since I initially applied the coating to the wheels, and that's enough time really just to make sure that it's applied correctly, levelled, and it starts to bond. So now you want to take the plush towel and just give it a gentle buff over. Nothing aggressive here, you want to just use very little pressure. It's a case of just going over the wheel in all the areas you have coated or that you know you've coated, and making sure that if there is any residue in it, and it's usually a very small amount of residue, the longer fibres of this towel will catch that and remove it, preventing it from turning into any kind of high spots. So this is not quite as thorough as the initial levelling of the coating, but it's just enough to go over things carefully and make sure that everything looks good. And I would always pay particular attention to the centre cap area, because these do tend to hide residue in them. Just make sure you go over that nice and evenly. And the same again for the barrels off the wheel. So again, the barrel's a nice easy one. Just a very quick going over is all that's required. And it does obviously help to have this tool here for coating your wheels. We do sell these on the website, they do tend to sell out quite quickly, but if you're quick you can usually grab one. I think that's perfect. That's looking good. So now that you've correctly installed Synergy Revolution on your wheels, what's the next stage? So in an ideal situation, you would leave these wheels off the vehicle for about 12 hours to cure. Now, obviously that's not going to be suitable for everybody, so you can actually install these back on the car and use the vehicle within 1 hour of application. I would only do that if you absolutely have to. What's going to happen here is the longer it gets to cure, the better overall the performance will be. It will still last the 2+ years, but the beading on the wheel will be a bit better if you can leave it as long as possible. What I tend to do, my preference is when the wheels are off the vehicle like this, I would leave them inside in a warm room overnight. So 12 hours, 24 hours, something like that. I appreciate not everybody can do that. So after 1 hour, you can actually use the vehicle. If you're going to do that, my recommendation would be grab a bottle of Synergy QD, give a very light mist onto the wheels just to protect the coating, go over them carefully and gently, and then put them back on the car and you'll be good to go.